Welcome back to Fiddle and Fables. Today's video is going to focus on changing strings on your violin. The number one rule before we get started is to always do one string at a time, because if you don't, your bridge can fall over. And if your bridge falls over, your sound post can fall over too. And if that happens, you'll have to take your violin to a professional. Now that you know that, let's get started. Before we get started with the video of me changing strings, I just wanted to show you a couple of different styles of tailpiece that you may see. The one that I'm going to be working with is on a rental viola from the violin shop that needed its strings changed out. And it's pretty standard. These are the type of fine tuners that it has. They're just the attachable fine tuners that you can put on any tailpiece, and you put the string in between those little notches and the ball locks it in place. The other common type of tailpiece you'll see is one without fine tuners, where the strings just go through the holes and lock into those little notches that you see there. On the E string on this violin, you can also see that there's a fine tuner with just a little hook, and the string actually has a loop on the end of it instead of a ball. That you're really only going to see for an E string on a violin. So let's get into changing the strings. Let's change the strings on this rental viola. So like I said, always do one string at a time. So first we'll remove just the bottom string on this instrument. Next you'll see me place the ball end of the new string into the slot of the fine tuner. Then you stick the other end of the string through the hole in the correct peg. And always turn the peg away from you so that the string is wrapped the correct way. When you're wrapping up the string, be sure to cross over a couple of times so the string holds itself in place. And you also want to avoid putting the string too close to either side of the peg box on the peg. This is because it can block the peg from tightening all the way if it's wrapped too close to the box. You'll get a couple more chances to see me wrap the string, just so that you have a good visual guideline to go off of. So for this second string, I actually had a little trouble getting it into the slot of the fine tuner. And this can happen if that slot's too narrow. Easiest way to fix it, and what you'll see me do here in a second, is to get a flathead screwdriver, or you can use a butter knife, something thin that you can stick in there, and just wiggle it back and forth to bend those little teeth wider. Don't worry, they probably won't break on you. They're pretty sturdy, but you definitely need them wide enough to fit your string between. So once again, through the hole in the peg, turn away from you, and you'll see I cross the string over itself to lock it in place. I'm also crossing the string over itself several more times just to make sure I don't wind it too close to the peg box. You also want to make sure that when you tighten your strings, they stay in the notches, in the nut, and in the bridge. If you do ever have trouble with the ball end of the string popping out of the tailpiece while you're trying to wind the string around the peg, that's totally okay. You can always go back and put it back in there after you've gotten the string mostly tight. Or you can start by winding the string part of the way and then putting the ball end in and keeping tension on it. Speaking of tension, when you first wind your strings, don't worry about getting your violin in tune right away. Just tighten them enough that the strings hold the bridge in place. And after you're done changing all 4 strings, then you can tune it. Just make sure you don't over tighten them. Just enough to be taut is good to start with. This one was a little too narrow too, so I had to grab that flathead screwdriver and wiggle those teeth apart for this string as well. With the highest string on the instrument, it's a little bit more important to keep tension on the string because these thinner strings are just a little bit more unruly and they like to go in all sorts of directions while you're winding them on the peg. So that's that. We've got these strings changed. And if you have a string guard like the one you see on that bridge, just loosen the highest string a little bit and slip it onto the bridge, and you're done. The one other tip I have for you about changing strings is to always keep a close eye on your bridge. You want your bridge to be standing up very straight, like in this picture. Don't be fooled though, the front side of the bridge is actually curved. So use the back side of the bridge towards the tailpiece as a reference for what straight is. This is really important because if your bridge starts leaning too far forward while you're changing strings and you don't notice, it could fall. With tension on the strings, the bridge will fall violently and hit the top of your instrument, possibly damaging it, and go flying across the room or even snap in half. It's really not pretty, so make sure your bridge is always standing up nice and straight.